I want you to picture something for a second. It's late in the day. The sun is just starting to dip below the horizon. Everything is turning that deep, dusky purple.
Okay.
The workday is done. The events of the day are finished. And only now, in this fading light, does a specific bird decide to take off and start flying.
It's a very moody image to start a deep dive with.
It is, isn't it? But it's famous. This is the Owl of Minerva. It comes from the German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel.
Ah, Hegel.
And honestly, it might be the most haunting way to think about how we understand history.
It really is. And it captures the entire mission of what we're doing today. Hegel's point was that wisdom, which, the owl represents,
Right.
only takes flight at dusk.
Right.
Basically, we can't understand a moment in history while we're living through it. We can only really see the shape of an era once it's grown old, collapsed, and is, effectively over.
Which brings us to our topic. We are taking that owl, and we are flying it over one of the most chaotic, tragic, and complex landscapes of the last 50 years.
The conflict in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Exactly. A region that has been analyzed to death, usually with a lot of finger pointing.
Oh, yeah. A lot of, they should have done this.
Right. The Soviets shouldn't have invaded, or the Americans messed this up. The sources we're looking at today are doing something different. They aren't looking at this as a comedy of errors.
No.
They're arguing that if you want to understand why the world looks the way it does today, you have to look at this conflict as a tragedy of reason.
That's a heavy phrase. A tragedy of reason.
It is. So here is the plan. We aren't going to get bogged down in every single skirmish. We're going to put on a philosophical lens to see how rational, smart people who thought they were doing the right thing, created a synthesis of ruin.
And I think the best place to start is with the biggest trap we all fall into when we look back at history. The sources call it the category error.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I think I do this all the time. I look back at, say, the Soviet invasion in 1979, and I think, what were they thinking? That was obviously going to fail.
Right. That's the error. We judge them by what we know now. We have the benefit of hindsight, what philosophers call totalizing theoretical reason.
We see the whole picture.
We see the whole picture because the puzzle is finished. But the people on the ground in 1979, they were using situated practical reason.
They didn't have the script.
Exactly. They were, to use a beautiful phrase from the text, spiritual beings of their time. They were trapped inside a specific way of seeing the world. They couldn't see the future any more than you or I can see what 2070 looks like.
So to really get this, we have to step into their shoes. We have to understand the box they were living in.
The epistemic horizon, as the source calls it.
Which, I have to be honest, sounds like something from a sci-fi movie.
It does sound a bit technical, doesn't it?
Okay.
But episteme just means knowledge. So the epistemic horizon is just the limit of what was thinkable or knowable at that time.
And for the Soviet Union, the United States, and Pakistan in the late 70s and 80s, that horizon was defined by one thing.
The Cold War.
Cold War.
And we have to be careful here. The Cold War wasn't just a political opinion. The source says it was the constitutive grammar of their reality.
The language they thought in.
Yes. Nothing had meaning on its own. It only had meaning if it was a move on the chessboard against the other guy.
So let's play this out. We have three main actors here. Let's start with the Soviet Union. The standard story I learned in school was that the 1979 invasion was just naked aggression.
Just an empire grabbing land.
Yeah, because that's what empires do.
That's the cartoon villain version. But if you look at the internal memos, the Politburo records, the view from inside their horizon, it looks very different. It wasn't aggression, it was panic.
Panic. The Soviet Union.
Absolute panic. They looked at Afghanistan and saw a client state that was fracturing. And they were bound by something called the Brezhnev doctrine.
Right, which was basically a rule that said,
once a country becomes socialist, it must stay socialist.
Yeah.
They couldn't let it fail, or it would signal weakness to the whole world.
So they weren't trying to conquer the world, they were trying to stop the bleeding.
They were trying to stabilize their own backyard. It was a calculation, a terrible, disastrous calculation, but within their system, it was rational. They thought they could go in, stabilize the government, and leave.
Which didn't happen. Okay, so that's the Soviets. Now let's look at the United States. And this is where the source material gets really specific about a man named Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Carter's national security advisor. A fascinating, incredibly sharp figure.
And he had a very specific view on this. The source quotes him basically saying that the goal wasn't save Afghanistan, it wasn't build democracy.
No, the goal was much, much colder. Brzezinski explicitly said the opportunity was to give the USSR its own Vietnam.
Wow. Its own Vietnam. That's a revenge fantasy, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
You heard us in Vietnam, so now we're going to drown you in Afghanistan.
It's what the text calls rationality.
That's a German mouthful.
Yeah.
It basically means instrumental rationality. It's when you treat a situation or a people purely as a tool to achieve a specific end.
So the U.S. wasn't thinking about the long-term health of Afghan society.
None at all. They were thinking about geopolitical cost imposition.
It sounds like a business transaction. How do we make this as expensive as possible for Moscow?
Exactly. It was pure efficiency. The logic was, how do we bleed the rival empire with the minimum direct commitment? No American boots on the ground, just money and weapons. A masterpiece of cold, strategic logic.
And then we have the third player, Pakistan. Their situation feels a bit different. It feels less about global domination and more about, well, staying alive.
It was existential. You have to remember the history here. In 1971, Pakistan was ripped in half.
Right, when East Pakistan became Bangladesh.
They lost half their country.
Yeah.
They were traumatized.
Yeah.
And they were terrified of India.
They felt like they were being amputated.
And so for the Pakistani generals, looking at Afghanistan wasn't about looking at a neighbor. It was about strategic depth.
Strategic depth. I've heard that term, but usually in submarine movies. What does it mean here?
It means they needed a backyard. If India invaded from the east, Pakistan needed a friendly, secure space to the west to retreat into or regroup. They couldn't afford to be encircled.
So supporting the Islamists in Afghanistan, that wasn't just because they were religious.
No, it was survival logic. They needed a government in Kabul that was friendly to Pakistan and hostile to India. And crucially, by making themselves the broker for the CIA's war against the Soviets, they ensured the U.S. money kept flowing.
It was a way to secure their borders and their bank accounts.
Precisely.
So we have three actors. The Soviets want stability. The Americans want to bleed the Soviets. The Pakistanis want survival. Everyone is acting rationally based on their own fears.
Right. And this is why the source says we have to stop calling these mistakes. If we just say, oh, they were stupid, we're falling into the Whig interpretation of history.
Hold on, Whig interpretation. I assume we aren't talking about British politics or Whigs.
No. It's a term for when historians assume that history is just a steady march toward us, toward our present enlightenment.
It makes us feel superior.
Exactly. But the tragedy is that these weren't stupid people. They were brilliant people, trapped in a dark room, making the best decisions they could, not realizing the room was rigged to explode.
Which brings us to the mechanism of that explosion. The source calls this the ontological error. Now, I know ontology is the study of being, or reality, but how do you make an error in reality?
By misunderstanding the kind of thing you're touching. The great powers treated Afghanistan like a mechanism, a machine.
Like a car engine, you fix a part and it runs.
More like a physics problem. Think of Newtonian physics, billiard balls. If I hit ball A with a certain amount of force, it will move ball B to a specific spot.
Okay, simple cause and effect.
So the logic was, if I apply force A, money and stayer missiles, to object B, the Mujahideen, I will get effect C, the Soviets leave.
And this is the key. Once the Soviets leave, I stop applying the force and the object goes back to rest.
But societies aren't billiard balls. They are biological, historical living things. The source calls them concrete historical worlds. When you inject billions of dollars in high-grade weaponry and radical ideology into a society, you aren't just moving it, you are mutating it.
This is the Frankenstein moment.
It really is. Think of it like a chemistry experiment. The US and Pakistan thought they were just mixing inert chemicals to cause a specific reaction. But the chemicals were alive.
The source talks about how the tool became an actor.
Yes. This is the pivot point of the tragedy. The Mujahideen started as a tool for American foreign policy. But when you mix American weapons with the ancient Pashtun code of Honor Pashtun-Wali, and then you add the narrative of global jihad,
You create something new.
you create a subjective force with its own soul. The resistance stopped being just about kicking out the Russians. It transformed into a transnational Islamist movement. It gained its own purpose.
And you can't just turn that off. You can't just say, okay, show's over, give the missiles back.
Exactly. The Americans and Pakistanis thought they could turn the faucet off in 1989. But the water had already flooded the house and rotted the foundation. The movement had its own teleology, its own internal goal. That had nothing to do with the Cold War anymore.
And this leads us to what I think is the darkest, most difficult concept in this entire deep dive. Hegel's. cunning of reason.
List der Vernunft.
It sounds ominous in German.
It is ominous. We usually like to think of reason or history as this benevolent force, like the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice.
Right. Things get better, eventually.
Hegel says, maybe. But reason is ruthless. Hegel argues that history achieves its big goals by using the passions and interests of individuals as fuel. It uses us.
It uses us.
It consumes us. Look at the result of the Afghan conflict from a satellite view. The Cold War ended. The Soviet Empire, a totalitarian regime, collapsed. The Berlin Wall fell.
From the perspective of world history, this was a massive success.
A huge success. Freedom won. The next stage of history began.
But if you zoom in from the satellite view to the street view,
it was absolute carnage. The instruments of this victory, the Afghan people, the Pakistani border regions, were left completely shattered.
There's a line in the source that really hit me. It says, "The universal march of reason offers no consolation to the particular ruins it leaves in its wake."
It's chilling. It's saying that the ethical good of the Cold War ending was bought with the currency of Afghan suffering. The cunning of reason used the zeal of the young jihadist and the desperation of the refugee to break the Soviet Union. And once the Soviet Union was broken, reason just moved on.
It's like the building was successfully demolished, which was the plan, but nobody cared about the people inside.
And that creates this deep ethical emptiness we feel. We won. But looking at the wreckage, it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like a crime scene.
But wait, I want to challenge this a little bit. We're talking about these grand philosophical forces, but practically speaking, these governments had thousands of smart analysts. The CIA, the ISI, the State Department. How did they all miss this mutation?
Right, how did nobody say, hey, maybe giving Stinger missiles to religious hardliners is a bad idea long term?
Yeah.
The source brings in Isaiah Berlin here, and the concept of the inexhaustibility of reality. Basically, reality is nonlinear and messy. But bureaucracies are linear.
They want spreadsheets.
They want predictability. They are Weberian machines. They're designed to execute tasks. And the irony is, the source argues that the agencies were actually too competent.
Competent, that's not a word I usually associate with this disaster.
Instrumental competence. Think about it. The CIA was incredible at logistics. They moved thousands of tons of weapons through impossible terrain without leaving a paper trail.
Okay, fair point. That is a massive logistical achievement.
The ISI Pakistan's intelligence was incredibly effective at managing these different warlord factions. The Saudi charities were very efficient at building madrasas and spreading doctrine. Everyone was great at their specific job.
That's the silo problem. The logistics guy isn't talking to the sociology guy.
Precisely. It was instrumental success, but systemic failure. Because no one was looking at the emergent property of all these successes combined.
Emergent property. That's when the whole is different from the sum of the parts.
Right. When you combine efficient arms distribution, efficient religious radicalization, and the total destruction of traditional tribal authority.
Yeah.
What do you get?
You get a vacuum. A pulverized society.
And in that vacuum, the Taliban didn't emerge because everyone in Afghanistan suddenly went crazy. They emerged because in a landscape of total warlordism, rape, and chaos, the Taliban offered the only rational choice. Order. Brutal order, but order.
So the Taliban wasn't the plan. Nobody wrote a memo saying, let's build a theocracy. It was the byproduct.
It was the shadow cast by the success of the anti-Soviet war.
Man. So if we stop looking for villains, if we start trying to find the one bad guy who twirled his mustache and ruined everything, we're left with something else.
The Strasser of tragedy.
And this is where we really have to put our philosopher hats on. Hegel had a very specific definition of tragedy based on the Greek play Antigone.
Right. I remember Antigone. She wants to bury her brother, but the king says no.
Exactly. And usually we think tragedy is good versus evil. But Hegel says no. True tragedy is the collision of two valid ethical claims.
Two rights making a wrong.
In a sense, two rights that are mutually exclusive. In Antigone, the law of the state is right to demand order, but the duty to the family is also right to demand burial. They are both right, but they cannot coexist.
They crash.
So applying that to our map, what are the colliding rights?
Well, look at it impartially. The United States had a valid claim, securing global order and rolling back totalitarianism. That is a legitimate ethical stance.
Okay.
Pakistan had a valid claim. National survival, protecting itself from being dismembered by larger neighbors.
Yeah.
That is a first duty of any state.
Sure.
The Afghan people had a valid claim. Sovereignty, self-determination, getting invaders off their land. And the Mujahideen had a valid claim, defending their faith.
So everyone felt they were the hero of their own story.
Exactly. Each claim possessed what Hegel calls ethical substance. But, and here's the tragedy, they were pursued, absolutely, without any recognition of the other claims.
The U.S. didn't care about the Afghan social fabric, it cared about the global order.
And Pakistan didn't care about Afghan sovereignty. It cared about its own survival.
And when those absolute claims crashed into each other,
you get the synthesis of ruin. They crash like geological plates. And the irony, which is central to all tragedy, is that the action led to its own negation.
Negation, meaning they got the opposite of what they wanted.
Precisely. The U.S. wanted to secure the world from terror. By ignoring the local reality, they created the petri dish for al-Qaeda.
They created a bigger terror threat?
Pakistan wanted to secure its borders. Right. By nurturing extremism to do it, they created a force that is now tearing Pakistan apart from the inside.
They bought security and got instability.
And the Afghans, who wanted freedom, ended up under the Taliban. Everyone became an agent of a fate that contradicted their intentions. That is the tragic rhythm of history. You push for total control, and you create chaos.
So we've flown over the history, the sun has set, it is fully dark now, the Owl of Minerva is in the air. What does the owl see? What are the lessons we can only see now that the damage is done?
The source outlines 3 massive realizations, and they are tough pills to swallow. The first is the autonomy of meaning.
This goes back to the hardware versus the software.
Yes. The lesson is, you can supply the weapons, but you cannot control the meaning. You can give a young man a Stinger missile, but you cannot dictate what that missile means to him.
Is it for liberty? Is it for jihad? Is it for passion and honor?
Exactly. Meaning is autonomous. It escapes the sponsor. We think we can buy loyalty, but we're just renting hands. We don't own the heads.
Right. What's the second lesson?
The indivisibility of security. This is the hard lesson for Pakistan and really for the whole world. You cannot be safe by setting your neighbor's house on fire.
The fire always jumps the fence.
Entropy always flows back. If you export disorder, if you destabilize a region to create strategic depth, that chaos will eventually come home. As refugees, as narcotics, as guns, as ideology, you cannot isolate yourself from the ruin you create.
And the third?
The irony of success. The supreme tactical success, the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, was the seed of the strategic disaster.
Winning the battle lost the war.
It dismantled the framework that held the world together. It unleashed forces for which no one was prepared. It teaches us a frightening lesson. Sometimes getting exactly what you want is the most dangerous thing that can happen.
It really forces a sense of humility. The source concludes with a meditation on human finitude.
It does. And this is where we have to leave the arrogance of the present behind. We are not the pilots of history. We like to think we are in the cockpit, steering the plane with our data and our strategies.
But Hegel suggests we are often just bewildered passengers.
We act with partial knowledge. We pursue rational ends within irrational totalities.
We chart our course by the dimmest of stars.
And only in the deepening dusk do we finally see the landscape we've been traveling through. The Owl of Minerva doesn't bring a solution. It doesn't fix the past. It just brings the cold comfort of understanding.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the owl only flies at dusk, what are we doing right now, in the noon of our own day?
That is the terrifying question to leave on. We are undoubtedly operating within our own closed epistemic horizons right now, pursuing goals that seem perfectly rational to us today. Economic efficiency, AI development, great power competition.
And 50 years from now, another set of historians might be sitting around a microphone looking back at us.
And they might see the synthesis of ruin that we are currently building, brick by rational brick, simply because we cannot see the whole picture.
What are the tragic collisions we are setting in motion today just because we're too focused on our own game of billiards?
That is the question the owl leaves us with, and I don't think there's an easy answer.
Something to stare at the ceiling and think about tonight. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy one, but I think a vital one.
My pleasure. It's good to look into the dark sometimes.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Stay curious, everyone.